Although Mitsubishi Zero is Japan's most recognizable aircraft of World War II, it was not the fastest or more powerful. That place belongs to a simple floatplane that evolved into Japan's last hope against the United States, the Kawanishi N1K2-J Shiden Kai, or George. The Shiden Kai was superior to the Zero in armament, speed, armor, and, most importantly, maneuverability, making it capable of successfully engaging U.S. Navy Corsairs and Hellcats and emerging victorious. A unique and creative feature, incorporated by the Shiden Kai's engineers, made the aircraft highly mobile and effective in combat, an idea so effective that it could have brought Japan to victory if it had arrived earlier in the war. Kawanishi Aircraft Company. The Kawanishi Aircraft Company was founded in 1920, after the Empire of Japan had emerged victorious during the aftermath of World War I. The company was a derivative of the Kawanishi conglomerate, which had been funding the Nakajima Aircraft Company. In 1921, the company came up with its first aircraft, the mail carrier Kawanishi K1, which became the first Japanese airplane to receive airworthiness certification from the Japanese Aviation Bureau. Although only one prototype was built, it paved the way for future Kawanishi aircraft designs. Many would end up being seaplanes, such as the H-6K and H-8K, as well as fighters, trainers, and bombers. As the thirst to conquer new territories grew among the Empire's army and navy, the entire Japanese industrial complex shifted toward military technological developments. In the 1930s, following the invasion of Chinese Manchuria and the eventual war with all of China, Kawanishi developed multiple floatplane fighters to support Japanese operations over the Pacific where no airstrips were available. When World War II broke out in 1939, and the Empire began to annex territories that once belonged to the Low Countries and the United Kingdom, the necessity for land-based fighters increased and surpassed that of floatplanes. Contrary to the Chinese, the British forces had a proper air force, and they retaliated with all they could muster. However, the Japanese now had airstrips from where they could launch air operations. N1K2 Shiden. In December of 1941, as the Empire prepared to strike the United States military in the Philippines and Pearl Harbor, engineers from Kawanishi Aircraft Company proposed a land-based variant of the floatplane fighter Kawanishi N1K2-J or Mighty Wind. Also known as the Rex by the Allied forces, the Kawanishi N1K1 had proven successful as a floatplane fighter during the early stages of the war. However, its effectiveness diminished as the United States Navy developed more capable fighters to fight against the Empire. During dogfights and face-to-face encounters with the enemy, the Kawanishi N1K1 Rex struggled with maneuverability due to the heavy and bulky float it carried. According to Russell Lee, a curator in the Aeronautics Department of the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum, the changes the Kawanishi engineers proposed to transform the floatplane to fly from land bases had an emphasis on maneuverability. These included removing the main float and the two wingtip floats and installing an 18-cylinder Homare engine to replace the standard 14-cylinder Kasei engine. In addition, a more sizable propeller was required to absorb the extra power from the new engines, and retractable landing gear with longer gear legs to keep the propeller off the ground. The new prototype was dubbed N1K1-J Shiden, and the first was delivered on December 27, 1942. An Imperial test pilot successfully flew it for the first time that day. Although the prototype was far from perfect, the Imperial Navy Air Service and the Kawanishi aircraft engineers were satisfied with the result, rushing it into service with a delivery of over 1,000 units. Violet Lightning design. Although the first batch of the N1K1-J Shiden was done and ready, Kawanishi engineers revisited the design just days after its maiden flight. The objective was to work on some of the aircraft's most noticeable problems. The Shiden had retained some of the characteristics of its predecessor, the Rex, such as the mid-mounted wing of the floatplane, which led to the longer and heavier landing gear modifications. However, the aircraft's landing gear proved troublesome due to the inefficient heat treatment of the wheels. Another issue with the first units was the powerful but unreliable Nakajima NK9A Homare 11 18-cylinder radial engine. Although it could effectively produce over 2,000 horsepower, its effectiveness decreased as the aircraft reached more altitude. Some pilots reported a maximum output of merely 1,300 horsepower. With time, the Homare would improve with more powerful variants that retained its compact design, giving way to the production of over 9,100 engines. The Imperial Navy soon noticed that the Shiden had a longer range than the Mitsubishi J2M Raiden and was faster than the already iconic and swift Zero. Consequently, the redesign of the aircraft was approved and funded. Even so, the Shiden was still too heavy, and the engineers decided to make it lighter and more maneuverable. As such, the wing was moved to the bottom of the fuselage, the landing gear was shortened, the tail was redesigned, and the overall fuselage was lengthened. In addition, the innovative combat flaps of the first prototype that automatically adjusted in response to acceleration and kept the pilot focused on the combat were kept and improved. Kawanishi got rid of over 550 pounds of unnecessary weight with such modifications, making the new variant faster and more effective. Soon, production was simplified because more than a third of the original Shiden parts could be used with the new derivative, which was designated N1K2-J Shiden Kai, meaning improved violet lightning. Combat capabilities. The revolutionary aircraft could be armed with 4 20mm Type 99 Mark II cannons mounted in the wings and 2 77mm Type 97 machine guns in the nose, and carry between 2 and 4 250-kilogram bombs, depending on the variant. It had a length of 29 feet, a wingspan of 39 feet, and a height of 13 feet, with a maximum takeoff weight of 9,526 pounds, and an incredible range thanks to an internal fuel capacity of 126 gallons, and over 85 gallons in an external drop tank. The N1K2-J Shiden Kai flew for the first time on January 1, 1944, and was rushed into production after a brief test phase showed excellent combat capabilities and handling. However, the fate of the Japanese Empire changed during the last 2 years. It was now collapsing, and the Imperial Army and Navy were retreating across all fronts of Asia and the Pacific after the Americans' victory at the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1943. As a result, air and naval supremacy now belonged to the United States and the Allies, but the Japanese were confident that introducing the Shiden Kai would help even the odds against the American F-6F Hellcats and G4U Corsairs. Even more importantly, the Imperial Navy trusted the Shiden Kai would counter the high-flying B-29 bombers ravaging mainland Japan with devastating bombing raids. Leaving the Zero behind. The Shiden Kai, or George, as the Americans called it, was considerably superior to the famous A6M-0. It was about 20 miles faster, coming up at a maximum speed of over 370 miles per hour at 18,000 feet. Additionally, it could roll at 82 degrees per second at 240 miles per hour, thanks to its Mercury switch that automatically extended the flaps during turns. These combat flaps enhanced the maneuverability of the fighter, generating more lift and allowing tighter turns. The combat flaps were triggered by a tube that held the Mercury switch, linked to the Kai's static air system. According to curator Russell Lee, the system automatically detected the amount of G-force and airspeed during a steep run and deployed the flaps without pilot intervention. This feature was unique to the Shiden Kai, and no other fighter in World War II used anything similar. The Imperial Japanese Navy gathered its most experienced pilots, and formed the 343rd Kokutai Naval Air Group. The pilots were led by the legendary Minoru Genda, who aided Admiral Yamamoto in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Into action. The Shiden Kai faced American Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs with even odds. In February of 1945, Lieutenant Kanayoshi Muto and his unit of Kais engaged a unit of Hellcat pilots and shot down 4 without any losses of their own. A month later, the elite 343rd Kokutai engaged U.S. Navy carriers and aircraft in a series of intense dogfights with a dozen Hellcats and accurate anti-aircraft fire. During the skirmish, the 343rd lost 6 Shidens, but downed at least 8 Hellcats. Then, on June 2nd, pilots from the 343rd engaged Corsairs from USS Shangri-La over Kagoshima Bay and also shot down more American aircraft than what they lost. Even so, the Shiden Kai arrived too late to change the outcome of the war for Japan. Overall, only 400 N1K2-J Shiden Kais were produced out of a total of 1,400 Shidens. Such models remained operational until the end of the war against the United States, and the 343rd Air Group was disbanded on August 14th when the Emperor surrendered. Some Shiden Kais can be appreciated today in several museums across the United States, including the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force and the National Air and Space Museum. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos, which we publish regularly. Stay tuned.